So we are here with my friend Özcan Çetin from the other side of Mediterranean, and it's a good time to get our passport and go to the Pacific. But let's give him the opportunity to explain some kind of presentation.
Thank you so much, man. Yeah, now we are going to the Pacific, like you say, and yeah, it will be it's a different topic. So we got bored about Mediterranean and the European affairs and the Middle East. So now it's time for the Pacific. So thank you for accepting me for your program.
It's interesting, a quite forgotten topic, because if we say, oh, what if Italy, Turkey, or any country could say, oh, Mediterranean is mine, all mine, what we would say to that country? Some kind of, you are crazy, you are imperialist, you want all for you, and we are what? Your valid sum? We are under you? No. This happens, but it happens in South China Sea. China, as President Trump said 1,000 times, the name of China. China is the country that in the 40s of 20th century draw 9 lines under the China Sea, saying, all this shall be mine. And from that, all regimes, including this one so-called communist, is claiming parallel islands, all islands inside the South China Sea. And that is not seen as imperialism. It's curious because history makes some turning points, and one of these was forgotten because what happened months before that, after that and before. In December 2000, President George Walker Bush was elected by Supreme Court because the final vote of Florida state was given by the Supreme Court, because the counting on the round on the state of Florida was going to give presidency to Al Gore, and they stopped, and presidency was given to George Herbert Walker Bush's son. So in that time it was a Republican that differently as Donald Trump wanted a secure America, more heavy implement in the world security. So when the Hainan incident, do you remember Hainan incident in April 1, 2001? And a plane, US Navy plane, EP-3E Aries 2, was collided by air in the middle of the Hainan and Spratly Islands. No, Spratly, no, Paracel Spratly are in the south, sorry. And it was given by Chinese Air Force to the island of Hainan. This crew was very young in preparation, because they didn't know what to destroy after the collider and before going to the islands, and many equipment was given to the intelligence of China. That idea would have a point of confidence. China is not confident, but in September 11, 2001 happened the attack on New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania, the U-93, and the view of the United States went into Iraq, Afghanistan, ISIS, Daesh, and those things. So China has had 20 years without the focus on him, and we have now the consequences on China's navy, on military, on the threats over Taiwan, on the threats over Hong Kong, and those things. Mainly, this is my quite a presentation of the idea. How do you see it?
Well, talking about China, we have to focus on how they grow, how they grow their economy. When I'm younger, I remember people use it to tell China will be the superpower in 10 years, and they will replace to America. They will be the new superpower. They will be the biggest economy in the world. Well, it didn't happen, but for sure, China is one of the strongest power in the world. And how did they manage to be like that? There's a stereotype about Chinese products. It's cheap. It's not strong enough. It's not high quality. It's useless. This is a stereotype about Chinese products, but it's an old stereotype actually. Right now, all we are using the Chinese-made laptops, Chinese-made phones, smartphones, and almost everything produced in China. So stereotype-wise was that China produced cheap and low-quality products, but now China indeed produce high-quality things. Not only smartphones and laptops, but also the weapons. Right now, China is one of the largest arms supplier to the world, especially in Africa. And my humble experience in Algeria, like a couple of times we have talked about, China is one of the biggest arms supplier to Algeria, for example, after Russia. So and it's not fair to say that Chinese arms, Chinese weapons are low quality. Actually, they are quite quality, and they work. They work in the battlefield, for example, in Syria and Libya, especially in Libya. Like countries like United Arab Emirates are utilizing Chinese-made drones, and they harm their enemies. So this is how they grow. They start from the small things, produce the small and low-quality things, but now they produce almost everything in the world. And China, in recent years, focus on the naval forces. In the first, it doesn't make sense because China is really large country, is a land country. I mean, they have ocean, of course, they have sea, but they are known. I mean, they are not like Japan. When you talk about Japan, the naval force come first because they are an island. But again, it could be a stereotype about China. China known as a land country, but actually they pay more attention, more focus to naval forces, and probably they're in recent years, in recent 10 years, I would say, they produce most of the ship in the world, and they are competing with Japan, which is traditionally a sea country, ocean nation, and China is competing with Japan and India in the Pacific. And you give an example from the Taiwan. There is a logic behind Chinese naval policy. It's Hong Kong first, and Taiwan first, and Hong Kong second. Well, we can talk about Hong Kong, but it seems like Hong Kong issue has been solved for China, for Chinese government, for Chinese Communist Party. But Taiwan still being the biggest issue because the geopolitical issue for China and the Chinese Communist Party. So there is the logic behind Chinese naval power is capturing back Taiwan one day. God knows when, but one day. That's the thing. But Chinese policy. I mean, I'm not expert of Chinese history, but I think anyone would know that Chinese government, Chinese political tradition, I would say governmental tradition, has plenty of patience. They know how to have patience. They know how to wait. I mean, there is a stereotype about politics. There is a tactic in politics: wait and see. Chinese politicians wait, but they are not only seeing; they are doing something. For example, building up island in the ocean, it's a genius idea, I would say. I mean, they are like, if you don't have island in the ocean, why not we build by ourselves? So they built island in the ocean, and then they claim the island is ours, and the area around island is also ours. The ocean. So they basically claim more area in ocean and in the land. That's quite, I will say, genius in sarcastic way, but it's also simple but works. Tactic simple but works. I think that two words enough to describe China's economic growth and political theory, or let's say doctrine, we can say. So beside that, recently again in 10 years, China is not only managing to secure around itself, but also they export products and the arms, of course, to Africa and the Middle East. I mean, again, there is a logic behind this policy, which is very easy. Energy. China is the biggest producer of the world. It's factory of the world, a factory on the planet. The biggest factory on the planet is China, and of course they need energy. And who has energy? Africa and the Middle Eastern countries. I don't know if you're aware of that, but some Chinese politics, some Chinese observers, monitors, were telling about Chinese stadium policy in Africa. First thing Chinese government do in Africa is asking the African governments if they need a stadium, soccer stadium, a football stadium. You know, soccer is the most popular game in the world, also in Africa, mostly in Africa. So building up a stadium for African people would be a good saving face policy. So they built the stadium first, and then they create the relationship between government, local government, and China. So this is how they start building up, creating the relationship with the African countries. So since we are committed to focus on the Pacific area, maybe we talk about the African policy of China later on. But there is something to talk about Taiwan. Like I say, naval force is one of the leading issue in that case. As you remember, once Russia started its military campaign in Ukraine, people immediately talk about Taiwan. What if China start a military campaign against Taiwan? That could be for sure the Third World War, for sure. And somehow Chinese government, unlike what people and political analysts were expecting, didn't really take side of Russia. Interestingly, because most of people will say, well, Russia is one of the biggest energy suppliers to China, and they're all communist friends, and they're on the same side against America. Of course, China will support Russia. Well, it didn't happen, as far as I see. It didn't happen. I mean, they didn't say something against the military campaign of Russia, but they didn't really take side of Russia. So that means how badly China needs Western economic investments. So Chinese dreams, Chinese policies in Taiwan is strongly depending on Western relationship to Western countries and, of course, America. Yeah.
True, we are talking about the Pacific and probably talking about Africa and Algeria, Libya, maybe Ethiopia. It is some kind of the charming Belt and Road initiative. Not only what happened in the Middle Ages for us, instead of what is Belt and Road for the new Chinese government.
Yeah.
But if we go to history, we can go to 1791 year. For sure, you are thinking, oh, he's going to talk about Paris. Yes, I'm going to talk about Paris in 1791. because one revolutionary, French Revolution, asked for the Chinese ambassador, "Oh, what do you think about our revolution? It's good. Do you like it?" And then it was 2 years only for the insurrection, the take of Bastille, and only 2 years. And the ambassador said, "Well, good. Ask me 2 centuries from now a Chinese idea of expanding time. Well, we are very old. You are young people of Europe. Tell me in 2 centuries from now. These people is the people what lost the Amur countryside to Russia, lost Hong Kong, lost many settlements in 19th century, and they are angry in 21st century. They want revenge from all the world, and in that revenge they destroy inside, because there is nothing they can do in Xinjiang or Tibet, but it's the way to Belt and Road, to control the way to Europe inside China. So they need this. Today is the anniversary, 25 years. I watched on TV. I was young, or at least younger than I am now. I watched on TV the devolution of United Kingdom of Hong Kong with Prince Charles and recently elected Prime Minister Tony Blair in the surrender of the empire in Hong Kong. It's curious because in 1974, in the revolutions of Portugal, Portugal denied the battle, the struggle for the colonies in Africa and in Asia. And in Asia, Macau, close to Hong Kong, the Portuguese government said to the Chinese authorities, "Here you have, take it. You have Macau now, this moment for you." And Chinese authorities in 1974 said, "No, we don't want Macau. We don't need it." And 10 years later, with the interviews of Deng Xiaoping with Margaret Thatcher, said, "Oh yes, we need Hong Kong. We need now." But the conversations delayed the devolution 13 years. And on that moment is where China said to Portugal, "Yes, we need Macau now." Portugal said, "Oh, we are quite late. We have a fado now. Maybe tomorrow or no." "Oh no, you can't leave. You tell me a years ago to give me Macau," and 2 years later, in 1999, Macau was given into China. What type of relationship can Taiwan look into a union or reunification with the continental China when the destruction of Hong Kong democracy and the transitional system of one country, two systems that was given by Deng Xiaoping, who died months before the devolution? What kind of democracy can support China continentally of Taiwan when the Hong Kong procedural of democracy, free of speech, is being destroyed? So it's true, when Ukraine thing happened, the aggression, people thought, "Oh, China can do this again." But China is, as you said, some kind of long term. He looks this will happen, but we won't go so very hard, because, well, it's the centenary of the Communist Revolution in 2049, so there is decades to get the country, to get Taiwan, but in the main, countries like Philippines, with Rodrigo Duterte as president, is now another, is the son of Ferdinand Marcos, best known as his wife and his shoes. Imelda Marcos has one of the greatest collections of shoes in the world. The son of the couple is now the president of Philippines, but the predecessor, Rodrigo Duterte, supposed to be the defender of the country. But when the United Nations trial in the court said, oh, the islands in China Sea, in the South China Sea, are yours, didn't do anything to defy China, defending those islands, property of Philippines. That is a good thing. How China has infiltrated in some mines in another countries inside the area.
Yeah, that's it's impressive, I will say, what Chinese government is doing. It's impressive what Macau. For sure, they have a wide vision when it comes to foreign politics. They know what they need and they know what they don't need. And again, when we come to issue of Taiwan, for sure they are waiting, and they do want to take Taiwan back for sure, but they're waiting for the right time. They don't want to have an issue Taiwan once they capture. I think capturing is not the issue here. It's how we manage Taiwan to be integrated to mainland of China. So they're waiting, and seems like they have too much patience. And like you say, road belt is how we call it, right? The train railway.
Belt and Road Initiative.
What's that?
Belt and Road Initiative.
Belt and Road Initiative, yeah. Again, I will say that I will come to the same point. What Chinese government is doing, simple but useful. I mean, it's train. I mean, it's not a ship. It's not a high technology airplane. It's train, just train. But it works. It works. It connects to Spain, to China, connects Spain to Taiwan, even from most west of Europe to most east of Asia. Connect. It's simple, but it works. And about islands, I think China. What I see, China is not intending to have issue with the neighbors. When I say neighbors, not only the border neighbors, but the countries around the China. I don't know if you know that, but the word China in the Chinese language, which I cannot pronounce, but you know the meaning? It means the central country. So China, through the history, described himself as a central country. I mean, in the world there is a center, and it's China. The other countries divided into 2 or 3. I'm not sure what this thing. It's like far countries, further countries, and very, very far countries. This is how they describe the world, and China in the center. So what China is doing, what China did until now, is creating safety around himself, like Tibet and the Uyghur, geopolitically good move by the Chinese government. They captured this area. I mean, these areas, Tibet and the Uyghur, East Turkestan, you can say, where the Muslim majority are living. Traditionally, land of the locals, not Chinese. It's stays west of the Great Wall. So basically, it's not a traditional China, but the Chinese government, with a geopolitical purpose, get these places, and now seems like they integrated somehow these 2 autonomous regions. But beside that, what China is doing with the neighbors is creating relationship via the economic. They basically give cash to small South Asian countries, and they are helping them to build up the infrastructure and somehow grow up around him, because these countries cannot be danger for Chinese government actually. In case US or other India, or I don't know, a country like one of the superpower in the world establish a military base in the small countries, the tiny countries, in that case it can be dangerous for Chinese government. But until now, as far as I know, Chinese government doesn't see any danger, any threat from the tiny countries. But still, they are building up economic relationship, and island policy could be something like that. So I don't see any incident that Chinese government will use its hard power to capture any island or islet in the ocean. But they will convince by money these governments to solve their problems, land problems. Only exception can be India. India is pretty exceptional.
Some people say that Turkish as language was created in Xinjiang, now that area. It's interesting, but the Turkish community may be issue for another talk in another moment, because all STAN countries, we can say STAN country, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, those STAN countries, for short, are in other part of the world. But going to history, it's interesting history. In 1420s, so we must say 6th century. 6th century is real, no? When China wanted to see the world, Zheng He expeditions. Zheng He was an admiral, Chinese fleet admiral, and it's curious because he was Muslim. And in that moment, treasury fleet was going to see the world and have ambassadors to China, the Indic Ocean, the Pacific, and some people say, as Kevin Menzies, UK Navy officer, retired, says that Chinese in those treasury fleet discovered America, and those ideas interesting for science fiction, but we cannot prove that because in Egyptian Greek era there was also a voyage from the Nile to the Red Sea and going to the Indic Ocean and going into the Pacific. There are some rock grabbed letters on some places in the Pacific, some kind of we were here, hello, we are Greeks, but some people say they went to the Chilean coast. Those ideas, the people went. The idea is Zheng He went to the world. How much world? Doesn't matter. The idea is when he came back to China, there was new emperor. The emperor died. So the new emperor asked Zheng He, "Oh, Zheng He, comrade, what have you seen in the world?" "Oh, I have seen this. And the new emperor said, "Oh, all this we have all this and better in China." So he burned fire, given fire to all the fleet, and China didn't go anywhere. So if the world needs something from China, they come to China. China is not going nowhere, because all the world can offer China is in China. So in the next centuries, China was given into the main center empire, the empire of the centrum. as you said, the name was this. And it happened in the 19th century. Europe knew that America was unable to be competitive because the what is the name, the Monroe Doctrine. America for Americans. Good. So no European could go to America and settle anything in 19th century. Africa, good competition for Africa, and some competition with Asia, and open wars. Russia getting Vladivostok. China was disbanded. It's the moment when Japan watched when Commodore Perry, admiral, more than admiral of the United States, came into the coasts, and they knew, oh, they have hurt the Western, have hurt China. They have given some kind of so if we stay closed, we will be as China. So the Japanese on the second part of the century, they opened the country, they entered into the Meiji era, and gave some kind of revolution, industrial, and well, we know what happened with the militarization, the Second World War, and the supposed demilitarization, and supposedly they don't have any army anymore, but they have a self-defense, and
Yes.
the self-defense army, navy, and air force. It's curious that they have carriers for self-defense force, but they are not an army. Curious. But China is now, because of the revolution, wanting to acquire a post in the world as the major player. It is said also for the Chinese followers that China is one of the best countries in the world because, differently of the United States, United Kingdom, France, of any other power, they did it peacefully, without any ballot. China has had martyred inside. Many people died. Famine, struggles in the 60s, in the 70s, 80s. Even the Deng Xiaoping times. But Deng Xiaoping looked forward and in the 80s opened settlements of freedom, but for commercial freedom, not for freedom of speech or freedom of politics, no, freedom of commerce. And on those curious places appeared, not proposed, but appeared some kind of capitalism, and capitalism grew up on China, and that's the way they are now, and they enter in the World Trade Organization as a third world country. They are on the level when they have some supplies of money from other part of the world. In World Trade Organization rankings, it appears on some kind of development country, a country in development. What is hilarious in nowadays China, but it is impossible to change. And it has reached the time that some countries inside the World Trade Organization have said to go out and create another organization outside to do the same thing like World Trade Organization, but without China. They think they were wrong taking in China. its history, or at least one part of history about what China has become, because we can say that in 1968, the Prime Minister of China was imprisoned secretly, and for 3 years in a secret prison with his own things we do as humans when we go out and what we get inside. It's very nasty saying, but those things. 3 years later, they said to the family he died, and only 10 years later they said to the public that that man, what was the first minister, the Prime Minister of China, who was supposed to be free and live some kind of inside China, was not alive and was dead for a decade. That is the communist in China.
Wow, that's the story is interesting. But when you talk about Japan, I remind something. It reminds me something. I graduated one of the college in Turkey, one of the rare college in Turkey that you can study Chinese politics, Chinese foreign politics. I mean, in Turkey it's not popular. You cannot find too many colleges like that. My college was one of them, and in lecture of Chinese foreign politics, we were talking about with the friends. We were discussing. It's just something unofficial. Chinese growth in terms of military and the politics and economy is in favor of Japan, or it's something against Japan. And of course, many people will say we're like, of course it's against Japan. China is one of the biggest enemy of Japan, and in geopolitics, I mean, they share the same area, same part of the earth, and of course, Chinese growth is dangerous for Japan. But I remind them what happened in World War II. Like you see, Japan has lost his army, and now they have self-defense. It's kind of army, but not a regular one. It's something else actually. Still, they have weapons, jets, and ships, I guess, but it's not a regular army. Japan, of course. I mean, Japan is one of the biggest economy in the world. It should be third, right? Third in the world. I mean, still, it's a huge economy and a huge population, huge potential, and of G7. And for sure, Japan has too much potential, but there is something Japan missing. No army. They don't have a regular army, so they need army to compete China, you know. And I was objecting to my friends. Maybe Chinese army is helping Japan to have an army, because the bigger Chinese army can help Japan to convince the U.S. Change his mind, and agreements which were signed in World War II, after World War II, that force Japan to not have an army, and that could help Japan to change mind of U.S. And probably it's working like that. It's working like that. I see Japan is taking a more active role in recent developments, global developments like Ukraine. They are one of the countries who sanctioned Russia. I don't know how it works so far, but they declared that they are sanctioning Russia, and for sure I think they're not hiding their desire of having an army anymore. I don't know if it will work. And China and Japan is just one side of the Pacific issue. There's other side, Korea, you know, and the communist country. Hello.
Yes.
I think my internet sucks today. Sorry for that. Korea, it's a tiny communist country. I mean, tiny in Asian standards. You know, they have 70 million population, or 90. I don't know. I mean, it's still bigger than Turkey and Spain, but compared to Japan and China or India, it's a tiny country, I would say. So this tiny communist country still alive, and it's one of the country the West capitalism couldn't enter so far. And yeah, people are suffering. I'm sure people are not enjoying their life in North Korea, but there is a fact stays in front of us: the government, the communist government, Kim Jong-un, still alive, and
it's
that's
very,
for sure.
it's very curious remembering that in the 40s, and in the 30s, and in the very beginning of the 20th century, the industrial area of Korea was in the north, around Pyongyang, and the south was agriculture.
Yeah.
Was a rural country.
Now it's other way around, right?
Communists get that? It's the miracle of communist countries that they destroy industries and they transform the surrounding countries into a big power. Curious. It's interesting because we can try to focus big, because if we focus small, we can see, oh, China is angry because Japan went badly in the Second World War, and then experiments. If we catch the Japanese experiments in Manchuria, so-called Manchukuo, are worst of any Gestapo or SS experiment on any extermination camp. They were by far worst in China. But of course, we can remember a word in Japanese that is kamikaze, and that idea in two times in our Middle Age, because Middle Age can be used by Europe, but in other parts of the world the classification of history is different, in Asia, in America, in Africa. But in our Middle Age, the Mongol country tried to invade two times Japan. Two times. There is a game of the one time of invasion. It's some time of samurai game, but I don't remember the some kind of ghost. We can see another time. But if you see Japanese that are like Arabs and Israelis are Semitics, both. Chinese and Japanese are both on the same, but they were different because those Chinese people that went to the islands were off contact, no contact with the continent, so countries and cultures went apart. So when they recounted on time, they were with the Mongol trials of invasion. So Japan has a mind of defense. We have to, but they lost some time with the shogun and the idea of civil wars, many times in civil wars in Japan. But that idea of defense from China is there, and with time, when they had power and China was in the unequal agreements of 19th century, that idea forward with the Meiji Revolution gave the opportunity of Japan to revenge on centuries of Chinese power and trial of intermission in Korea and in Japan. So those tides going forward from China was tried to go back with that moment in Second World War. China didn't get happy with that, so that's the idea of we have to go back in Japanese superiority, because it was one moment, only one moment in history. It's like what happened in Vietnam. In Vietnam, they lost, Western countries lost in Dien Bien Phu in 1944. 54, not 44, 54. French countries in the 50s. And the United States came inside, replacing France, and they went to war. Because the idea of domino, the idea of if Vietnam falls, then Indonesia will fall, and then Australia will fall, and all the East Asia will be communist, and it's all done. Because it was one thinking at the moment. So they went to Vietnam, and they lost. They lost. Huge lost. But after the 1975, during the 25 years ongoing, it was interesting policy, because in 2000 President of the United States was in Hanoi. Now 97% of Vietnamese love capitalism, not communism. 97% of Vietnamese love capitalism, and is one of the closest friends of the United States. So, who won the war on the long time? We could say that United States on long time has won the war in Vietnam.
Yeah.
It's curious, because if you see in those idea of time from China, things can go otherwise, another perception. And it's true, in Korea, South Korea is a Christian country. Curious, in Asia. But it's a Christian country.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. You have a point that, I mean, in the hard power, the US is the loser in the Vietnam War. But like you say, in the long term, US is the winner. And as far as I know, Vietnam is closer to US in terms of economic and culture, more than they are close to China. And that's quite interesting. And I think now we can talk about my favorite topic, soft power. This is one of my favorite topics in the international affairs and politics. I really love to read about a theory of soft power, more than hard power, I will say, the culture and economy. So it's curious. I'm curious about Chinese soft power, how they gain the soft power around neighboring countries and in the world. Like in the beginning, I was talking about the Chinese products, the stereotype about them. First, when I was younger, when we say, "Hey, this Chinese-made phone," nah, it's not quality. But now, all we are using Chinese-made phones, and they're
sometimes being your sugar daddy.
Sorry?
Your sugar daddy. Oh, you are Sri Lanka, good. You had a civil war. Oh, you are poor and you have troubles. Oh, I will. What do you need? Oh, you got this ship, a port inside your country. Good. I will give you a port, a huge port, a good port. But if there is war, I will have a clause here. If there is war, I take the control of the port. It's mine. But the rest of the days is yours. Huh? And that happens in many times. Not only giving, oh, you need a stadium. Good, I give it you. Giving a port, giving infrastructures, and if it's needed, turns into Chinese.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Chinese government never gives something for free. I mean, none of the governments give something for free, but Chinese governments are more straightforward when it comes to gifts, like stadium or anything like that. There is a story, I don't know if it's true or no, but Chinese government once built the building for the African Union, if I'm not mistaken. And one day, I mean, once they finished the construction, and the building is in operation, it's operative. And one day, the people who are working in the building, African Union staff, noticed that the internet is really slow and they don't know what's going on. And then they ask some friend countries, friend nations to search what's wrong about the internet connection, and they found that there are some bots placed by probably Chinese governments to listen up what's going on between African diplomats. I don't know if the story true or no, but this is what I read.
It's probably true because it's proven that till the fall of the 20th century, the Chinese leadership bought aircraft to Boeing, to United States Boeing company, and at least there was some kind of 747 for the Chinese president to fly from the world, and they thought, for one, thinking that can appear that we will look forward by the plane because it may be something wrong or not. There can be travels of from the place it was made. We will look forward, and the plane was plenty of those items you said. United States intelligence community put everywhere in the plane things to hear and watch and know, and Americans, you did this, you are not friends.
So maybe they have to, they have to reduce number of these bots, this electronic devices, so they make it overdose maybe.
They started to think the Chinese president will go into a Chinese plane.
Yeah. So talking about soft power again, not only Chinese soft power, also the Japan and Korean soft power is rising in the globe right now. I don't know if you noticed or not, but nowadays
example, some kind of soft power, but in this case collided with hard power, is with the earthquake and tsunami in 2004. In the December 26, it was Christmas, and then Gulf and then Strait in Indonesia was very heavy, the power of the waves, and the United States gave an aircraft carrier. Why? Because an aircraft carrier is a city on the seas. You can put everything from the carrier into the land and put hospitals, infrastructures, everything. It was seen as a hard power, but in real was soft power because was the best structure they can give to try a proxy approach. I don't think it's yours.
Yeah, exactly. This is how they. I think it's smart, by the way. To be honest, it's quite smart. I mean, if you want to make a relationship with an African country, building up a stadium it's pretty nice idea. Why not? And if you want to make a good relationship with a South Asian country, I think the ports, building up the ports and the ships, anything but sea is a good idea, like fishing, ships, or innovation to help them improve the infrastructure. It's quite good idea from Chinese side. Why not? And that, like you say, in the same time, both hard power and the soft power is rising in that way, right? And the stereotypes helping the Chinese government to be more popular, actually, uh, being hard worker, being smart. These are the stereotype, but Asians, Asian individuals. It's somehow racist, I will say. I mean, making anyone in the stereotype is racist, but this is how people are make communication with each other. So Chinese government, unlike many other communists, not many other, but unlike the other communist countries, didn't only use hard power, but use his soft power as well, cultural, economic, but not religion. I mean, I don't know if you find any sentences in any text, Chinese government and the word religion in same sentences. I never heard something like that. So Chinese government is not using religion, but they use culture, they use movies, they are using music to improve their soft power in Western nations, and of course economy. They are making more investments. There is something interesting. Couple of major European car brands have been sold to Chinese companies like Volvo. Now, I mean, Volvo is the strongest Sweden car brand, but actually it's owned by a Chinese company right now. So they are buying the soccer clubs, car brands, car factories, and like I repeat many times today, they have patience and they are waiting for the best time to use these tools, this soft power weapons to get power, not invade to somewhere. I really don't think China wants to intend to invade somewhere by military or with a hard power, but for sure they have desire to get more economic investments, more economic opportunities, and getting richer and getting more powerful, of course. But until now, as far as I see, they prefer soft power rather than the hard one.
It's interesting because the play is given by many parts, not only what China plays, but the perception of what China says and gives to world. So we can put on a curious issue, because there is a land, and we talked about Portugal in the revolution in 1974-75, and Portugal has one place in Asia, not only Macau, East Timor. It was decolonized by Portugal in 1975, and people appeared to say, oh, if we do this will be a very poor government, very influenceable, so China will control this government and will be there and change into a communist government. Marxist-Leninists will settle in this land, close to Indonesia, close to Asia, Australia, and this will be very hard to remember. These days in 1975 were the days of Saigon Fall, bad to the world and bad to the United States. So in this moment appeared Indonesia and invaded East Timor. But was the only play to say that, because Australians knew inside East Timor there were oil and gas, and if this was an independent country, they wouldn't give anything to Australia. Why to give to Australia? We will give whatever we want. A contract and get the capitalist play. But Australians wanted this for them and get an agreement with Indonesia to take 50-50 Indonesia and Australia Timor oil and gas. This was secret for all the world, but it was declassified from a few years. They were independent in 2002, United Nations process, and they have had serious problems of diplomatics with East Timor government, but it has now is known those ideas because Australians were not a fair player. They were not a democratic human rights defender as they supposed to be. On the other side, we see in the 80s in Afghanistan, the Soviets knew there were richness in Afghanistan, but they couldn't get it. And who knows if China, that knows those reports, now can substitute Soviets crossing the statements those 2 decades of United States in Afghanistan, and maybe now China can get those things in. So the idea I was going to put inside was there are more players than they are declared. In the Afghanistan case, we can see the war in the 80s within the Soviets, and then the war within Americans in the first decades in 21st century. And in Australia, we can say, oh, it's East Timor and Portugal and Indonesia. No, Australia is inside, and was not. Australia is supposed to be democracy, a balance to totalitarianism in their zone, in the area, because it was until the 70s there was an organization. Therefore, we say NATO, Spain, Turkey is inside NATO and those things, but until the 70s there was SEATO, Southeast Treatment Organization, disbanded by Vietnam War, curiously. There was also a Baghdad Agreement to make some kind of NATO in the Middle East. People don't remember these things, but it's part of geopolitics. And now it's AUKUS between Australia, United Kingdom, and United States. And there is also the Five Eyes of intelligence. There are some kind of game with players taking part, economic, politics. It's a curious game when there is soft power, hard power.
To me, it's quite hard power issue. Like you say, NATO is North Atlantic treatment. It is not East Atlantic, right, or Pacific. But right now, people are talking loudly about accepting new members to NATO. I mean, we already have Sweden and Finland, but we know how it works, how it happens. Russia, unwisely, I will say, invade Ukraine to make Ukraine not a NATO member, but now Russia has 2 NATO members on his border. And here we have to ask a question: will China repeat the same mistake that Russia did? Will Chinese government, Communist Party, will provoke his neighbors to force them to be member of any kind of military treatment? I don't really think Chinese government will do so. There is not a desire of countries in Pacific wants to be part of military treatment with the West. We talk about Australia, and we have to add Korea, also Japan. Well, Japan is the weakest nation between when it comes to military power. But Korea and Australia must be very willing to join NATO itself or something alike NATO treatment or alliance, something alike to with NATO. People are right now talking loudly about this, but there is another question. I mean, NATO is huge. There are 30 countries, 30 NATO nations, and it will be 32 with Finland and Sweden. And just imagine, just create a scenario. South Korea wants to be member of NATO, and being member of NATO is not something easy. You have to sign an agreement to promise you will attack any country who attack any member of NATO. So it's quite big. It's quite big. It's something we never find in history. And will Portugal, another member of NATO, or for example, Finland, probably new member of NATO, will commit this promise to defend South Korea? What Finnish people will think about it, or will Spanish people be willing to protect Australia, which is miles away from the nations? So it's, I mean, on the paper it's easy to be member, but when it comes to practice, you have to prepare the roadmap to this membership. So it's, I mean, people are talking loudly, but still.
Something called what happened? What a pity, because frozen. We hope to get back as possible. Oh, he will get back for sure in a moment. We will wait. It was very interesting what he was telling us. Problems with internet in the area, my friend area. So
Hello.
yes, for sure it was Xi Jinping cutting internet.
It's possible. Even the
people.
4G sucks here. I don't know what's wrong about the internet connection in this country.
This is what I was talking about. You see?
What's that?
Mm.
Can you make further? I cannot read it.
Not focus.
Yeah, it's not focusing.
At least you see the.
Yeah, I see the map.
Flag. The flag.
I see the map.
The flag. Good. It's Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. South Asia Treaty Organization was an international organization for collective defense in Southeast Asia, created by the Southeast Asia Collective Defense Treaty or Manila Pact, signed in September 1954 in Manila, the Philippines. The formal institution of OSCE was established on 19 February 1955 at the meeting at treaty partners in Bangkok, Thailand. The organization headquarters were also in Bangkok. 8 members joined the organization. Was dissolved 30 June 1977. So was 23 years of living. Membership: Australia, France, New Zealand, Pakistan, Philippines, Thailand, United Kingdom and United States. Not members protected by CIETO: Cambodia until 1956, Khmer Republic from 1970 to 1975, Laos and South Vietnam. It's an interesting organization that I meant some kind of NATO, but in Southeast. It can be possible another organization like that with Japan, South Korea, maybe Taiwan, maybe Philippines, maybe Vietnam. Who knows? It's possible to counter China. Is China so silly to give the opportunity to those countries to make a new organization for defense? Are the West powers possibly united to do this? Because AUKUS was a punch over the face of France, because France had many times of lands in the area. New Caledonia has given by NOEMA agreements in 1988 3 times of independence referendum, and they say 3 times they want to be French. So it's a big part of the area, and many islands are France. And if United States, United Kingdom and Australia go together aparting the French side, what kind of support may France do with the idea of the Anglosphere?
Yeah.
Because the paper of the Indo-Pacific strategy of European Union is brought by the Quai d'Orsay. Quai d'Orsay made the paper for the European Union about the Indo-Pacific strategy. You can see there are similarities, because France is very interested in the European defense of their own interests, because it's given by the idea of Anglosphere, of defending the English-speaking countries. But the counter idea is against China, so it is supposed to be all together. And the idea of Biden, President Biden, saying to South Korea and Japan decades ago they were impossible to see side to side, and Biden has said that both kids get together, because the problem is with China, not between you.
Yeah.
So it's not a free and not fair thing. There are many things inside.
Yeah, but Juan, there's something we have to focus on. You can create this kind of organizations. You can get many nations to sign such an agreement, but what we'll have in the practice? I mean, you just list the countries in this organization, South Asian or treatment or something like that. We have Pakistan here. We have the Pakistan in the list, and Pakistan one of the strongest ally of China in the region, not only in the region, in the globe actually. So how do you expect Pakistan to do something against China? First, they cannot, because of first they take plenty of loan from the Chinese banks. I mean, they have too much debt to Chinese government, and the second, they have a common enemy, which is India, and the third, China is giants. China is huge, and Pakistan have this giant power on his border. So how do you expect Pakistan to take action against China, even though he is member of this agreement? And like you say, like you give the example of France. I mean, France and other European countries considered as the democratic countries. And what is democracy? Democratic country means a country where people are involved to governing of the administration of the government. And what will France people think to send the troops or weapons or taking military action against a country miles away from the Europe, or to protect a tiny Asian nation in the middle of the Pacific? I mean, how the France presidents, if something like that happens, how the France politician will explain this to the people? I mean, it's a France, one of the democratic country in the world, and this is legit for other European countries. For Australia also. I mean, Australia considered as the Western country. I mean, not geographically, but yeah, in terms of politics and geopolitics. So it doesn't seem to be realistic. And other issue: how many organizations like that we will have? We have NATO, and the question is that we will get NATO wider, larger, and bigger, or we will create small NATOs in the corner, in anywhere in the world, like South Asian NATO, Latin American NATO, Baltic NATO, Pacific NATO. Will it work or no? These are questions. These are the questions.
Yes, it's true, because in NATO summit in Madrid, there was invited 4 Asian countries: Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. It's true.
Yeah.
And it's true that polarization is given by ASEAN. You know ASEAN, the economic organization. There are countries within China, and there are countries against China. China polarizes Asian organization. It's true.
Yeah.
But it's also true that that idea that we talk about in South China Sea is potential initial of some kind of World War I in Europe, because it is inside Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, Brunei, Singapore, many countries that have islands in South China Sea, and they have sovereign deals with inside, and sovereign rights within the waters and the economic area. And China says all those area is not yours, it's not Vietnam, it's not Malaysia, it's not Brunei, it's not Singapore, it's not Indonesia, and until the door of your country is all China. What if in all the Caribbean the United States would say the same? What would Cuba say? Venezuela? Nicaragua? If United States say all the Caribbean, all the main sea inside the Americas is part of the United States. But China is considered differently. Until when? It may be the moment, sometime, that not with a big struggle, but with a single shot. One single shot in one island, in Straddling Islands, from one side or one side, that doesn't matter, shooting and giving one death. What can, like in Sarajevo, the killing of Ferdinand, can happen, because China will not regret of the want of giving the rights. Who sees China saying, "Oh, doesn't matter, China, we will take part, but some kind of these areas yours"? Who can dream of those ideas? China will go on peacefully, but we defending the rights, because it is supposed, as we said, China is a big country, but it's not a big country at all. They have problems. Many of the population is on the coast. The most of the population is on the coast, and it's a country that if the coast was independent, it would be a Western country by the index, by the the numbers, and inside will be a third country, third world country. But they also have problems in the longevity of the people. They are getting old. They are having problems of work power to replace the people working now. They have problems with the payments of the state for the retirement, not in 2022, but in the decades ago, ahead, not ago, ahead. So they are a country when let's have an example. Argentina. Argentina is not a Pacific country, but in 1982 they had problems, many problems, with Galtieri junta, and the idea to try to solve that was recovering Falklands. So the trial to recover the popularity was a war within United Kingdom. What if some kind of that principle anytime in future goes into China, and the idea of getting firm and hard in South China Sea gets some kind of war accepted, not given, accepted? We go there, and what happens? We accept it and provoke a war like First World War in the area. And what happens there?
You have a point on this, and I want to remind you the BRICS summit, which is held a couple of days before NATO summit in Madrid. Like you know, BRICS is an organization, economic organization, not only economic, as far as I know. The main members are the Brazil, Russia, India, China, and I forget the second one. What's that?
South Africa.
South Africa. So it's quite interesting. It's a quite interesting organization, and it has huge potential. And while NATO accepting new members, talking about new members and being wider, getting larger, even in the Pacific, BRICS also accepting new members like Iran and Algeria and Venezuela, if I'm not mistaken, and Argentina. These countries are willing, showing their will to join this organization. And not only the West, this is my point, not only the West creating organizations, treatments, alliance between the nations, but also the China and Russia are doing the same. And like I say, what does count is the practice. I mean, how you convince to Pakistan, again, the same example, how you convince Pakistan to take action against China or India. Like you said, China has a problem with almost all neighbors, and the biggest problem they have with India, the border issue. But India and China in the same organization, and they are neighbors. They both are nuclear power and two largest population and largest economies. How you will convince? And India considered as a country against China, but in the practice, it's not really like that. I mean, they have good relationship with the U.S. They have good relationship with Russia, even though they fight with rocks and woodens last year. They still have good relationship with China. I mean, they're not like all in, you know. They are not sacrificing everything against China. So the organization of South Pacific, South Asian Protectant, something like that. In practice, how it works, since the rival countries are committing and creating new organizations, and since the new possible members of BRICS are interesting, Venezuela, Iran, and Algeria. The three countries are the three largest countries of oil. They have energy, which China and India needs. So something get China and India together, which is energy. They both need energy, and even though India has good relationship with the West and U.S., I really don't see willing from Indian government to totally take side of West. They don't want to take action against China totally. They just want to solve their problem. Once they solve the problem with China, they don't have any other problem. So yeah, like you say, China has problems, issues with neighbors, but seems like they are willing, and again I insist on that, they are willing to solve the problem with the soft power, not rather than hard power. India again could be an exception, but still they are not in edge of big war. So yeah, to me, new members will give more potential to BRICS, and the other member of BRICS, the Brazil, it's just a couple of miles away from the U.S. And imagine that somehow they convince Brazil to take a side of Russia and China, mostly China. I'm not saying it's possible, or I'm not claiming that it will be possible, but I say in case it happens, it will be big trouble for the U.S. I mean, as you play in backyard of someone else, they also try to do something in your backyard. So it's like you say, it's a big geopolitical game.
It's true, and I understand the point. It's true, but for sure you understand the difference in intergovernmental organization and supra-governmental organization. It's very different. For sure, one type of that is in 19th century the form of traffic or communications, because we have rules for traffic and communication settled on the 19th century, and we say nothing because it's commonly used, and that was one of the first forms of intergovernmental organization in the very beginning of new type of globalization. For now, we can say China and Russia can make true intergovernmental organizations. But supra-governmental organization like NATO or European Union is unable for China and least for Russia, because to make China a United European or NATO organization, it is more than one against idea. They can be some countries against China because they are angry with some politics, but for making, you have to have one idea in common, one power of mind. European countries have in NATO and European Union, but China can't give one idea. Communist, Shinto, what idea? Confucianism, what type of idea can share to Myanmar, to Vietnam, to Philippines? Very different countries. Buddhist country, Christian country, economically, politically, militarily. For sure, India, you said India. India is a good country because will be a superpower and will be larger in population than China in a few years. They want, for sure, they will be happy if Andaman and Nicobar Islands stop the commerce routes of China. For sure, they will be happy if they do this, but they can't. Because of that, the navy of India is growing. But China sees that and doesn't want to New Delhi give the money to the army to bring the navy up. So that's the way in the mountains. There are classes to make Indians waste some kind of money in the army and on the land to disperse the wasting of money on the budget in India, because China is afraid of India. It's true, and India is for now playing a game of not going with only one country. It's neutral with the war of Russia in Ukraine, but also is not supporting Russia. It's going with the United States, but not much. It's having some products for military in China, but buying other to Russia, other to United States, diversaging. But one time will arrive to the idea of what type of country will China affect to India, because India will have to decide in future things, because it's very known the Cuban crisis in 1962, October crisis, but on the same days, it's curious, forgotten, it was a war between India and China in 1962. Also, there was a little war between China and United Soviet, the USSR in 1964. There are little things that people forget, because for the main stream, the idea of Soviet Union, China, they are friends forever, because communism, Marxism, Leninism, good, and China and India, they are close friends, and but the China is friend of Pakistan. why China is Pakistan and Pakistan are friends, because Pakistan has one idea of deep what's the strategy, the idea of that having them Afghanistan, Pakistan controlling Afghanistan, they have the capability, if there is a war between India and China, and if there is a war between India and Pakistan, and the idea of retiring from Pakistan indeed is a small country, very, and if there is a war, well,
and Pakistan is Muslim, and China needs Muslim friends, because this is one of the biggest accusations against China. The Western governments, you kill the Muslim minority in China, in Xinjiang. So for sure Pakistan has more than one features when they attract China from more than one side, and one of the side is being Muslim. Having a Muslim friend in the world is in favor of Chinese government to save the face.
It's true. There are plenty of curiosities. The government that was downed in August 2021. Now Afghanistan, there are Talibans, but the previous government was friend of India. So Pakistan wanted to give back to Taliban because Taliban are friends of Pakistan. Indeed, it's curious because there are Pakistan Talibans.
Yeah, there is
a war in Balochistan. So they wanted the Afghan government Indian friendly out, but with Talibans, Pakistan has more problems. But they are supposed to be least with. So there are many pieces on the table. It's true. Like water in the Tibet and the Indostan is very important because the supply to India comes from there, from the beginning of the rivers inside Tibet. So if China controls Tibet, can cut some kind in the future the water supply of India, and India for sure is angry and very committed in trying to solve this problem for decades ahead.
Yeah. So, yeah, in the end, we can say that it's wider geopolitic scope. But good thing about China. Let's start from the bad things. Bad thing about China. He has many neighbors and has almost problems with almost all the neighbors. Border problem with Russia, border problem with India, and island problem with other South Asian tiny countries and Australia, and Taiwan issue. So having too many neighbors is somehow good and somehow bad. It's bad and good for China. It's good if they attract them, Chinese Communist Party attract them to be a friend of China, but it's bad if they cannot solve the problem. I mean, until now they show too much patience, but like you say, not everyone is happy to see China has good relationship with other nations. So it's good and bad, I would say.
True. There are situations of crisis, and the idea of the countries is how to solve them. But with the idea that any crisis is complex, many ingredients, many players. So how to try to go forward in impossible to get an Adamist view, because the world doesn't start now. The world is started 1,000 years ago, and the relations are settled. that some kind the idea of Brexit is unable to be positive, because what some Brexiters say is that oh, we go out from European Union and the world will be as we like. No, the world is as it is, and Britain outside European Union goes to a settled world, not the world London wants to be inside, to be designed as London wants. No, the world is as it is. So China, on other scale, has the same problem. When on the 80s went outside to compete in a proto-capitalism system, they had to go very strong, and they did, but with difficulties. For example, the idea of Malthusianism, the Malthusianism view of only one child politics, has given the problems of the pyramid structure of population that will go further in worst in the decades ahead. At the end of the century, China will have a huge problem in many manners. So it's true. The view of the world and the play of the world, it's difficult. For the idea, you said that surrounding countries are not in good favor with China, and finally, the idea of China, what will do? At least the tail is very important. What the tail, the world is related. The idea, the writing, the speech, the form of saying what China wants, what China is. For example, in Ukraine, Ukrainians have won that war, the war of tail. China is able to get the world as they want to be related. They say what is the reality, or the world can write their own story about their relation with China.
Yeah, but there is a point we have to talk about. China is never exporting his ideology, the communist ideology. I mean, like we say, you cannot find a text where the name of China and the world religion comes together. We can say the same, if not same, but similar things about communism. China, yeah, it's for sure a communist country. I mean, legally, officially, is a communist country, but they never export communism. They never export ideology. Instead, they are very successful to perform and governmental capitalism, right? And we have biggest companies like we were talking about. They are buying football clubs, car brands in Europe, and other companies in the West, even in the US. So they play very capitalist, but officially they are communists. So they are not. I mean, they for sure they are willing to keep their communist ideology, but they are not exporting. They are not willing to export this ideology. Instead, they export the products, their soft power, popularity, and a friendship with other nations.
Interesting. So this is not a thing for now, because the world is focused mainly on war between Russia and Ukraine. But when this ends, probably the world will go back to East Asia, and we will see what the people and the governments think in future. So we can go to an end for this talk for now, and thanking the opportunity of speaking about this.
Yeah, I didn't get the last point because of my bad internet.
I was thanking the opportunity of talking about this issue and this item, about the idea of China, Pacific, and the relations between the countries in the area.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to talk about these things, and it was very interesting. Even though it's not my major, it's not something I focus on. But like, since the world is a small village, it was nice to talk about Pacific issues. And thank you for giving me such an opportunity.
A pleasure, for sure. We will talk another time for another issue. So thank you to the people coming to this point and comment freely.
Thank you so much for all, and you too.